Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Fantasy Fellow Show. I'm your host, the Fellow KGB. You can follow me on Twitter at the Fellow KGB. And tonight, Wednesday, January 6th, it's about 6 p.m. Central Time, just a little bit after 6. I'll be going live here just for a little while tonight. Tonight's the show where we record and talk about all the misses that we had in the pre-draft process leading up in the summer. Really weird off-season with no preseason, no really interesting training camp situations really unfolding either. So every year I do put together my 2020 projections document here where I have a page for each team, and then it all gets compiled at the end. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to probably just take a look at the wide receivers, everything in position groups, and we'll kind of just see, where I was close, where I was wrong, things like that. So I think what we're going to do is we're going to start with the quarterbacks, and let's just take a look here. My number one projected quarterback coming into the year was Lamar Jackson. I think that was a common, if he was not one or number two, I think that was the common spot for Lamar Jackson. So I had Lamar and Patrick Mahomes here at the top, 1 and 2. And I still feel pretty good about where I had those guys ranked. I wasn't really drafting Lamar Jackson to begin with. So like if you were watching my mock drafts or my pre-draft shows, we weren't really a big fan of Lamar Jackson in the round 2 value. We thought about Mahomes. We were probably more into the Prescott Wilson, Tom Brady territory. So the fact that, Lamar Jackson, he kind of had a roller coaster type season, but he kind of got it together at the end of the year. So how he was playing maybe the last month and a half of football, I think that's kind of what we projected for a full season. So it was a miss, but he kind of corrected the situation towards the end of the year. And then with Patrick Mahomes, we see, I think he was quarterback number 4 on the season. He did not play in the last game. I still feel pretty good about Patrick Mahomes. I'm probably going to rank him, number 1, number 2 at this point next year. So we're going to consider this, it's not a good win, but it's, we got him in the correct area. And then Dak Prescott, what do you do with Mr. Prescott? I mean, the way he was playing, he was probably the number 1 quarterback those first 4 or 5 games. Insane amounts of yards. So that was a pretty good ranking here for the number 3. So I don't feel like we missed on Dak Prescott. We had him at the upper echelon, and I'm just assuming next year with CeeDee Lamb year 2, Amari Cooper, Blake Jarwin maybe even, and Michael Gallup. So Dak Prescott, we're gonna probably talk about him on Friday. Let me just see what's rolling on. What's going on, Aiden? Thanks for hanging out. Are you doing the NFL Playoff Challenge? I'm not sure which challenge you are referring to, but I am amongst friends and some people that are just kind of sending it around. I'm doing a NFL playoff challenge where it's like an NCAA bracket, and we're just filling out our brackets similar to that. And it's a $10 prize pool. If you guys are interested in it, you guys can contact me or email me, kgbauer92, or no, not that one. Do it at the fellowkgb@gmail.com. But if you guys are interested, it is a $10 thing. I don't know if you guys want to play, but I think I don't know. I'm willing to invite others here too. So I don't know if you guys are interested. I can put information on that out there for sure. Jenna, you won your league. Awesome. I was thinking about you because we had that Deshaun Watson, Jalen Hurts situation going on. I think I remember telling you to play Jalen Hurts. I don't know if that worked out the best. Deshaun Watson had a pretty good game back in week 16. So, but this is great news, Jenna. Super glad you won your league. That's awesome. Very awesome. I hope other people won their leagues too from watching my videos. So really, really cool. Diggs and Adams. Yeah, that was the cheat code. Especially in week 16, that was the game where I think Diggs had 3 touchdowns, and did Adams have 2, maybe 3 as well? So pretty awesome. The receivers carried you. Probably wasn't close if you had those 2 guys. So there, congrats, Jenna, on your championship win. And then in tonight's show, I'm just kind of talking about the guys that I missed on. So my top 5 quarterbacks coming into the season: Lamar Jackson, Pat Mahomes, Dak Prescott, Russell Wilson at 4. We'll take that as a win. Tom Brady at 5. I didn't miss on him. Kyler Murray. This is a slight miss. I don't think anyone else really had him, up in the 1, 2, 3 spot there. But Kyler Murray at 6. I'll admit that I was a little bit low here. I didn't really see the rushing numbers here. I think everyone was kind of amazed at how many rushing touchdowns he had, how elite he was as a runner. Just out of curiosity, I just want to see what he finished with for rushing stats, because man, he just floating, people in the first half of the season here. So we do see Kyler Murray with 819 yards and 11 touchdowns So pretty good numbers here for Kyler Murray. The most rushing touchdowns by Cam Newton got him by one. So that's interesting there, but really good numbers here from Mr. Murray. Almost 4,000 yards, 26-12. Let me see what I had for my ratio here. So I had Kyler Murray throwing 25 and 13, just around 4,000 yards. So I pretty much just missed on him by about 300 rushing yards and 6 rushing touchdowns. So I think I'm okay with that, but we'll label that as a miss. I should have probably boosted up his numbers just a little bit there. So then Aiden saying, it's like fantasy football. We got to choose out everybody in the playoffs for each round. And each round, if you use the same player, they points double. Interesting. 500. Holy crap. Okay. Interesting. Let's see here. If you want to hear me line up, I will. Yeah, you can post your lineup. We can talk about it. We'll see what you got going on there. It's tricky too because you want Kansas City and Green Bay players, but you're not getting any points for that first round. So that does get a little bit tricky there. My next quarterback here on the list was quarterback 7, Aaron Rodgers. I wasn't high enough on him. I was probably one of the higher people on Aaron Rodgers to begin the season. So this one did pay off if you selected Aaron Rodgers. I play in the league that I focus on the most is a super flex league here. So I really like the quarterbacks that are kind of in the lower area here. I try to get one top tier quarterback and then one maybe solid quarterback too. So Rodgers will take that as a win. Deshaun Watson, he was quarterback 4. I was a little bit low on him. Quarterback 8, I think he did finish again as quarterback 4. So this one is a slight miss. Just look at his stats real quick. I had him projected for 4,150 yards, 27 touchdowns, 13 interceptions. So let's see what he had here. He led the league in passing, 4,823 yards, 33-7 touchdown interception ratio, about 450 yards and 3 rushing touchdowns. So pretty close with the rushing, formula here. I feel pretty confident with that. But man, we missed on him by 6 touchdowns and overinflated his interceptions by quite a bit here. So Deshaun Watson, man, blew up in the passing yards, also more touchdowns here. So that's my bad there. That's probably a miss here that I kind of regret. I should have probably ranked him, but where people were drafting him, you were probably taking him as the 4th or 5th valued quarterback. So for me, I'm always trying to get draft a guy of value. So I don't know if I saw the value with Watson or Kyler Murray, but the way they ended up, Murray definitely was a value at any time you took him. And then Deshaun Watson, of course, was probably the one guy here that was just a steady value. You didn't lose or gain much on it, but he was a top 5 quarterback at the end of the day. Matt Ryan, man, he was my quarterback 9. Let me see where he ended up here real quick. So Matt Ryan he's a quarterback 12, so that's fairly close. I missed on him a little bit, but I don't really consider that a miss. That's maybe just an over miss by a little bit there. Almost 4,800 yards, 32-12 interception touchdown ratio. So he ended up with we're off by about 300 touchdowns or 300 yards, and then a 26-11. We had him at a 32-12. So I think if Julio played, that might have buoyed his numbers a little bit there. So kind of interesting things going on so far here. Josh Allen's the next quarterback. Okay, so this is technically the biggest miss. For Josh Allen to finish as the quarterback 1, I have him at quarterback 10. Whew, I should have seen that coming because he was probably like the 8th, 9th, 10th quarterback taken in your draft. So that's the huge position of value. I only had him throwing the ball 500 times this year. Let's see what he ended up throwing the ball. He threw the ball 572. So that's a really huge miss on my part there. 4,500 yards. And we had him for 30. We were off by 1,000 yards, 24 touchdowns to 11 interceptions. Just looking at this real quick, the man threw 37 touchdowns and 10 interceptions. So at least we got the interceptions, pretty much smack dab on the middle there. But missed by 13 touchdowns, missed by 1,000 yards. I'll have to get better at this next year. But 550 rushing yards and 7 rushing touchdowns. Let's just look at this real quick. So I overprojected the yards. The touchdowns 7 to 8 will take that there too. But man, I just don't think anyone really expected this to click like it did with Stephon Diggs, John Brown, Cole Beasley, even the rookie wide receiver there, Gabriel Davis. Gabriel Davis had himself a pretty nice rookie season, kind of under the radar there. So Josh Allen, that's probably the biggest miss that I had all season here. That one, I do regret not taking Josh Allen when I could have in a couple leagues. I did have him in a keeper league though, so that did kind of work itself out. Let me see what we got going on here from Aiden. So he's got Josh Allen. That looks like Aaron Jones, Derrick Henry, DK Metcalf, AJ Brown, Travis Kelce, Buffalo Bills kicker, and the Saints defense. Okay, I like that. I'm just trying to think. So we're not going to get points on Aaron Jones this weekend or Travis Kelce, but the next I mean, those are two guys that are likely to play each other in the Super Bowl. I think most people would agree with that. Derrick Henry versus the Ravens. I mean, if the Titans are going to win, they got to feed Derrick Henry. I think Josh Allen's a really good call. You get him for this weekend against the Colts. And then, the Bills might end up winning 2 games and end up playing Kansas City there. So I think you're for sure getting maybe 2 games and then possibly that third game if they meet in the AFC Championship, or it could even be 4. So this seems like a pretty good mix. Again, you got 2 Titans, so you're banking on the Titans to win against Baltimore. I've been picking Tennessee to beat Baltimore. I think they're a little bit more balanced team, and they bounced them last year here. So yeah, you're going to get double points the following weekend. So I mean, Saints defense against the Bears this weekend, that makes a lot of sense. And then there's the potential where they would play Seattle. So I think I agree with you with your Saints defense call. There's a good chance that, yes, they're going to probably beat the Bears. I think most people would agree with that. And then you're also looking ahead at the Seattle game where I know we have DK Metcalf on the team, but from an offensive standpoint, Seattle has not been playing the best football. That game would also be in New Orleans. I don't know if they have a small amount of fans there, but I do like the Saints defensive call here. Probably the safest defense to pick that's playing this weekend. Otherwise, maybe Packers have been playing good. The Chiefs also a favorite there too. So I don't know if you have to like salary cap this, if you had to buy these guys with price numbers like a DraftKings lineup or what. But I like this team here, and you can't go wrong with Travis Kelce. I think maybe the only other tight end I might consider, it might be Robert Tonyan. I don't know if that would maybe, if this is a salary cap issue, that maybe that helps you increase, somewhere else. But a pretty good team. I think you got a pretty good shot here, and you got good exposure kind of sprinkled throughout. So interesting lineup there for you, Aiden. But just back to my misses, I guess. I had Matt Stafford, quarterback 11. With his weird season, I mean, he finished as quarterback 15, but from a points per game basis, I think he did end up playing all 16 games, but he was kind of in and out of a handful of games here. So we had him for just over 4,000 yards, 26 touchdowns, 10 interceptions. Let me see what I had him for. So about 500 yards off, a 33-9 interception touchdown ratio. But the key with this one is I can't really call this a miss, even though I had him at 11th and he finished 15th. He did this without Kenny Golladay. So I just think the process was correct on Matt Stafford. And then we got Drew Brees here at number 12. Let's see where he ended up finishing. Now, again, he missed a good chunk of the season, but on a points per game basis, maybe that's how we should do this. Because then you're going to see, you take a Mariota's 1-game sample away, but Prescott was the quarterback 1 on the year, Allen 3, Rodgers number 5. I guess we're going to ignore the Mariota thing. So, but you do see Drew Brees here. He would have been quarterback number 15. So I had him relatively low at number 12. It's a little bit of a difference there. So I don't think that's a miss. But the Carson Wentz was a pretty big miss. That whole Eagles offense pretty much backfired. This year, I had him projected for just over, 4,100 yards, 30 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. And for Wentz to not even finish as a quarterback, too, only 12 games played. And on a points per game basis, he was quarterback number 24. Again, we're ignoring the number 1 here, Marcus Mariota, since it's a 1-game sample size. But Carson Wentz, man, that was probably my biggest miss. I just think that Eagles offense in general, everything just kind of it was a weird snowball effect where nothing really worked. Even if you took Miles Sanders, Zach Ertz, a lot of those guys disappointed here. So the one biggest miss I think so far, Carson Wentz. This wasn't a guy that I was advocating to draft either. So I think I'm okay with missing on Carson Wentz. I wasn't super hot on the passing situation for Philly. I was more interested in probably Dallas Goedert, if I'm being honest. That was the one Philly Eagle that I was making sure I would get here. You see Jared Goff at quarterback number 14 on my rankings. And Jared Goff, he ended up playing as quarterback number 24. But if you started Jared Goff, and let's just see where he finished on the season-long standings. But he ended up quarterback 20, so this is another kind of miss here. Only 20 passing touchdowns for Jared Goff. They ended up running the ball probably a little bit more efficiently and better than I thought they would. That's probably going to be a lot of the misses that I talk about in the running back column, but I'll take the L here on Jared Goff. Quarterback 20, I had him projected as a solid quarterback too, number 14 overall. Cam Newton, I wasn't super high on Cam Newton. I had him here at 15. He did end up finishing as quarterback 17, so that's fairly good value. But Ryan Tannehill, and I even thought I had Ryan Tannehill ranked higher than most people. I had him at quarterback 16. I mean, in hindsight, I would have probably had Tannehill up here, as 12, above Drew Brees, Wentz, Goff, Newton. I should have had Tannehill even higher, but I think the easy analysis with this is I missed on Corey Davis. Corey Davis had himself a hell of a season. So I think if I were to, boost up Corey Davis's numbers a little bit, I would have had Ryan Tannehill as a top 10, top 12 quarterback situation. But man, 3,800 yards, 33 touchdowns, and 7 picks. But the 7 rushing touchdowns, I don't think anyone would have projected that in a right mind. I had him projected for 3, so like that's good there. I mean, but if you add, what's that? 4 more times 6, 24 more points there would have put him right here at the quarterback 12 here. So if I would have just boosted the rushing numbers a little bit, I did feel pretty good about the passing. We were really close on the passing yards, really close on the interceptions, off by a few touchdowns here. So I'm just thinking, I don't know. I was close on Tannehill. I was probably higher on him than most. But man, just missing on that rushing number. So that's something I'll probably evaluate going forward with the rushing. That seems to be one of the numbers that I have missed, is the rushing numbers on a few quarterbacks. Is this KP Porter Jr.? Is that who KP? I can't think of KP. Kevin Porter Jr. Or is that Kristaps Porzingis? That might be Zingis. Yeah, I did see Zingis is going to be back. They're saying in a week and a half, maybe. So that's going to be a really good boost for basketball lineups. It's going to probably be a slow start that first week or two that he's back. He's going to get kind of eased back in with the lineup. But if you were waiting on the Porzingis to get back in your lineup, the time is coming. And I think maybe by February he'll be kind of back up to his full potential. Gardner Minshew. This is kind of a miss. Just that whole Jacksonville situation in general. I had him at quarterback 26. He ends up getting benched, gets hurt. It is a miss. We'll count Gardner Minshew here as a miss. Daniel Jones at 18, Roethlisberger 19. Let me see where these guys ended up. So Daniel Jones, 14 games, he ended up as quarterback, number 23, but he was kind of abysmal this year. So that was just more of a product of him playing a lot of games. You see Ben Roethlisberger here at 14. Again, I think that's another product of him playing a lot of games. 3,800 yards, 33 touchdowns. Let me see what I had him at. I had him at 4,500 yards and close on the touchdowns here. So I was actually high on Roethlisberger here at number 19. So the way I do my projections, this is something I'm going to have to tweak in the future later. But with the quarterbacks, I tend to project them for about 14, 15, 16 games. I try to give them the benefit of the doubt. And basically, by thinking that a quarterback's going to play almost a full season, it helps me really put the projections and the numbers for the other players, whether it's a running back or a receiver. So I'm thinking long-term with these. So Ben Roethlisberger at quarterback 19, he could have been a quarterback 2 for you all season. And then guys like Joe Burrow, Teddy Bridgewater, Derek Carr, he was a top quarterback this year. Surprisingly, he ended up being quarterback 13. And he missed, he got hurt in that first quarter of was it the Miami Dolphins game? I believe that was the Dolphins game, or maybe the week before against the Chargers. Yeah, the Chargers. I think it was week 15. So Derek Carr, pretty impressive season. We'll see if they can keep him around and keep, building up weapons on that team. Baker Mayfield, quarterback number 23. He ended up, quarterback 16. So this one, it does seem like a little bit of a miss here. He did catch fire at the end of the season, but the first half of the year, I think that's kind of what I expected. So for quarterbacks, I did feel like I was fairly accurate with what we did. But I always think that with quarterbacks, I played mainly in Superflex league, so there's a little bit more leeway of being right or wrong. So for the most part, my quarterbacks in my Superflex leagues, it was Tom Brady. I had a pretty good draft there with Tom Brady. I ended up with Teddy Bridgewater. I also drafted, who did I draft as my quarterback 3? Well, I drafted Tyrod Taylor, and because of that situation, it led me to Justin Herbert. So I was in a decent spot there with Herbert as my quarterback 2. But we're going to move over to the running back tab real quick. Let's take a look and see. So my running backs, of course, I had Christian McCaffrey as my running back 1. I think he would have been pretty crazy not to do it. And I'm not going to count this as a miss because when the guy played, he averaged 30 fantasy points per game in a PPR league. Let me see what Aiden's got going on in Kristaps. Should I try to trade for him? Broken 3-point league. It would depend on who you're moving for. I don't think it's going to be a while before his value is as great as it is, or as great as it could be. He's probably still not going to play for another week and a half to 2 weeks. And then even when he gets back, it's going to be a small ramp up period. He's not going to be, playing, 30 plus minutes off the bench right away or anything like that. So this might be a little bit longer stretch. I think if your team's in good shape and you can afford to kind of wait on him. But there's also too the Porzingis does seem to get injured kind of often. So if you're banking on Porzingis here, I wouldn't want to trade up a major piece here. I do think that he can be a value, but you're gonna have to be patient with him. So what's going on, Oscar? The next basketball stream, I think I'm gonna do one tomorrow night. I think it'll be a solo podcast. We'll just kind of look at things, whatever else you guys want to talk about. I've never done a solo basketball podcast, but I figured we might open up with some player prop bet thinking and things like that. We'll just look at some of the guys that I'm kind of interested in. We'll just kind of keep doing that. So Clark, I'm not sure what this is asking. Matisse Thybulle and Obi. I'm not sure what you're asking. How Clark, like a 3-for-1 deal? Is that what you're looking for here? But if you guys don't mind, I wouldn't mind saving the basketball questions for tomorrow. I kind of wanted to keep things basically just fantasy football focused with this show. So we're just talking about misses and things that I miss with my draft prep here. This is just a good way for kind of me to review my process and kind of sit back and look at things. But Christian McCaffrey, I don't feel I missed on him. He was still a number 1 running back when he was in. He was averaging 30 fantasy points per game here. So I don't feel bad about that. Saquon Barkley, this one, I probably should have been lower on Saquon Barkley. It's hard to project injury. But for me to have him up there at number 2 as potentially a high-risk guy, he's been injured now in 2 of 3 seasons. I do regret this. I didn't take Saquon Barkley in any of my big money leagues, maybe just some best ball leagues and such. But again, with injuries, I don't know if I can call injury players to be misses. That just seems kind of like a hard situation to put on yourself. So Ezekiel Elliott, though, this was another injury type situation where when Dak Prescott was playing, you could see Ezekiel Elliott was a top running back. If we just look at his numbers real quick, I mean, the way it was in PPR leagues, Ezekiel Elliott he was finished as the running back 9 here. So you probably took him 2nd, 3rd, 4th running back off the board. And for that first month, I mean, he was delivering, he was getting touchdowns, putting up numbers. The receptions was awesome. 6, 6, 8, 8. Just a lot of production here. Dak Prescott gets hurt, and then everything is just kind of meh after that. So I do think the process was correct on Ezekiel Elliott. Now, Alvin Kamara, this man, I did have him projected for not as high of a reception total. He had more yards, he had more receiving touchdowns, and I only had him projected for 7 rushing touchdowns. So this was a mistake by me. The man ends up with 16 rushing touchdowns, 756 receiving yards, and the 5 touchdowns. So whatever, I'm close on that. But I missed on the receiving and the receiving yards per catch average, just a massive average here. So I missed on that. And then I just also missed on the rushing touchdowns by quite a large margin. I did correctly have him, projected for a career high in rushing yards, but only 7 rushing touchdowns. What was I thinking? So I should have probably boosted that a little bit more, and that might have got him, above Ezekiel Elliott, maybe even over Kamara, or even over Barkley. So if you ended up taking Alvin Kamara, you probably had a pretty nice Week 16 with that red and the green shoes, 6 touchdown performance there. Derrick Henry, I was pretty happy with my Derrick Henry projection. Did project him to lead the league in rushing touchdowns too. Pretty close on the receiving numbers. He just didn't score a touchdown this year. So Derrick Henry, that's a pretty good one. Dalvin Cook, I kind of missed on Dalvin Cook a little bit here. Only 10 rushing touchdowns, under 1,200 yards. Dalvin Cook, let's see here. He ends up with almost 1,600 rushing yards and 16 touchdowns. So I think at the time, I was kind of low projecting Dalvin Cook. I thought there'd be more usage behind the running backs with him. And he's always been kind of an injury-prone player, so I did probably knock off maybe 2 or 3 games here. Yeah, Oscar, this is definitely one guy that I missed on. David Johnson as my RB 24 here. Now, for the most part, David Johnson, when he played, he was a double-digit running back. And for, the 3 or 4 games that he missed, that was really the only times where he wasn't usable. But anytime that he was healthy, David Johnson, and we see him, he was RB21. So on a long season standpoint, the numbers were fairly accurate, but he played much better than RB21. If we filter here by fantasy points per game as running backs, and then just forget about number 4 here, Mr. Antonio Williams. That guy's an outlier in this data. So you see David Johnson here at 17. He's actually RB16 on a points per game basis here. And he did end up with almost 700 rushing yards, 6 touchdowns, 314 receiving yards, and 2 touchdowns. So just looking at that, he ends up with about 181 fantasy points. And I guess I had him projected for 192. So I guess the lesson for me is I'm probably inflating a lot of these numbers here. So for the most part, I did get the numbers fairly correct. If anything, I over projected his rushing totals. I had a little bit lower here on the David Johnson receiving numbers here, but for the most part, I guess the long-term season standpoint, I did have injury concerns with David Johnson. So I don't know if I missed on David Johnson. Maybe I just missed on how consistent he would be. Yeah, man, everybody missed on the James Robinson for sure. I don't even know if I had him in my ranking system. Let me see. Let's go to Jacksonville real quick. At the moment, let's see here. Oh, I did have him projected. I had him projected for 20 carries and 85 yards. I basically had him projected for one game at this point. So I just the whole Jaguars mess. Raquel Armstead, Divine Zigbo. I think both those guys were on the COVID list. I had Chris Thompson projected for a lot of passing situation here, but this whole Jacksonville Jaguars situation with the running back, we didn't really get any clarity for a while until maybe that last week or two. They trade Fournette, and then we hear James Robinson is the starter, but we also kind of like the draft capital of a Divine Zigbo. I think Raquel Armstead did some things in his rookie year that actually looked pretty good, and I actually expected a little bit more out of Raquel Armstead. I just not sure. His rookie season, he did catch 2 touchdowns. He was a pretty good receiver here too. So I kind of had Divine Zigbo or Raquel Armstead being the lead back for this one. So I did miss on that one quite a bit, but was able to pick up James Robinson. So it did kind of work out. But just let me see what's going on here. Gibson or JD next season. It depends on what Washington does with their quarterback, I think. But man, I'm going to have a hard time not taking is JD McKissick. He's going to need a pass catching running back. I think I'm going to go. You got to go with Gibson in this one. Yes, James Conner. I don't know what it is with James Conner. He just always gets hurt. He's an exciting running back. I didn't have him projected for a huge season. I mean, just 1,000 yards, 9 touchdowns, but a little bit inflated in the passing game. Let me see how many games he ended up playing. James Conner, let's see where he was on a points per game basis. James Conner, RB29. Yikes. So 215 receiving yards. I think this is where I was the lowest or missed the most. 35 catches, 215 receiving yards, and I had him basically double on that situation. So that should have lowered him by quite a bit. I don't think a lot of people saw the JD McKissick situation there. When you drop half your team and get rid of Fournette the next day, pick up 100. Yeah, well, I don't think they picked up. They had James Robinson signed in there even before Leonard Fournette was cut. He was with the training camp, all that summer. But it just seemed like because he was playing so well, they wanted to see more of him and less of Fournette. So he essentially just pushed Fournette out the door there. So Adrian Peterson, let's take a look here. I wasn't super high on the Detroit Lions situation. I'm looking here. Adrian Peterson. Let me just go to the Detroit Lions tab here real quick. So I don't even think I got that in there at the time because I was like the last weekend here. So before, I think with Washington, I still had Adrian Peterson. Man, where did I have Adrian Peterson? Did he get kind of lost in the cracks here? So Kerryon Johnson, Bo Scarborough. I might have lost Adrian Peterson in the shuffle here. I just kept him off the list. So I don't think he was a guy that people were drafting. I don't see his name here either. So that's another area where I need to clean it up, I suppose, making sure, because typically I think that he signed with them really late in the season. I think at that point I stopped updating the projections because I had already drafted. So maybe just a little bit more effort out of me that last weekend there. And yeah, Deontay Johnson went kind of undervalued there. So we'll get to the receivers in just a second here, but just kind of finishing on running backs. Chubb, Aaron Jones, I had these guys kind of all in the right spot. Austin Eckler, when he played, he was a top 10 running back. Josh Jacobs, I don't think a lot of people expected him to be a top 10 running back. I had him just there at the top 10. James Conner, this is a miss. Again, he's an injury-prone player. We should have kind of knew this, and I kind of had him overinflated with the numbers here. I had a lot of expectations for the Steelers' offense. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, I shouldn't have probably had him as the top-rated running back for the rookie class. I think the next closest was Jonathan Taylor here at 20. which in hindsight, I was feeling comfortable with Jonathan, where I had Jonathan Taylor projected. But if you remember, before the season started, there was a lot of rumblings that Marlon Mack would kind of be in the way here. So, I mean, I had a lot of carries, a lot of yards, and a handful of touchdowns here from Marlon Mack. So in hindsight, if I knew Marlon Mack wasn't going to be there, I probably would have had Jonathan Taylor pretty high. So at the time, you got to work with what you know. So I had Taylor, relatively high here. I had also Antonio Gibson, both these guys as top, RB2s essentially, Cam Akers as well. So for the most part, I was drafting, Taylor and Gibson at these rankings because not a lot of people had them as high there. But Clyde Edwards-Helaire, we're going to consider that a miss. He did get hurt to the end of the year, but I think if people ended up drafting him, you were probably pretty disappointed. There wasn't a lot of involvement in the passing game that we were expecting. He just wasn't scoring touchdowns. I think that was the most surprising thing with Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Just an awesome offense, but Mahomes just cleaned it up with Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce. So his opportunity for touchdowns, I think that's the biggest disappointment and probably the miss there. In terms of yards, 905 yards and 425 receiving. I was off by 100 there, and I was fairly close, but I think the touchdowns is what really takes this away here. So I missed a little bit on those touchdowns. Let me see here. Joe Mixon, we can't evaluate that. He was injured for most of the season here. He actually played pretty well when he was in too. He was on a points per game basis. He was RB11, so he did have that one game before he got hurt. Miles Sanders, I was actually lower than most people on Miles Sanders, so I didn't draft Miles Sanders once this year. So at RB14, I did kind of fade him a little bit. I probably could have faded that offense a little bit more, but we'll see what happens with some stability there. I was lower on Kenyon Drake a little bit than more people. From a points per game basis, you see Kenyon Drake at RB27. So if you ended up taking Kenyon Drake in the second round, I saw him go in the first round at the end of the first round sometimes. This was probably not a very good draft pick for you, but 10 rushing touchdowns, almost 1,000 yards. It was if you look at it really closely, I was really close on his projections. I just missed the receiving volume. Everything went to Chase Edmonds for the most part. So 25 catches, 137 yards. That was not there for Kenyon Drake. Le'Veon Bell. Okay, so this is a miss. This is a pretty big miss. It's in hindsight though, it's difficult to see because if he would have stayed with the Jets and they would have continued to give him the ball as they were doing before, but for the most part, I should have probably faded the Jets offense a little bit more there. So I'm a little bit nervous about what the Jets are going to be in the future, but new head coaching, maybe a new quarterback, kind of stuff going on there. So I'm hoping the Jets clean house for the most part here. Chris Carson, I think this was a fairly accurate projection. Just over 1,100 yards, 7 touchdowns, and a decent amount of passing stats here. Let's see. On a points per game basis, he was running back 15. He did miss a handful of games here, so it's kind of hard to evaluate. But 187 total projected points, 15.7. I do feel fairly decent about that projection. And then Raheem Mostert. Raheem Mostert is a little bit of a miss, I would say. When he played, he wasn't a bust. I think the issue, again, it's similar to maybe a little bit different than James Conner because when Raheem played, he played great, especially the first handful of games of the season. But Raheem's one of those players where he's a gliding running back, and when anything's nicked up on his vehicle, it's going to be a little bit bumpy. But when he played, he was very productive. Not as many touchdowns at the end of the year. They were kind of leaning on Jeff Wilson a little bit here. So I just think I really liked Raheem Mostert coming into the season. He actually had a better fantasy points per game than he did the year before. You see 12.7 fantasy points per game here. So a little bit, I probably should have been a little bit lower on it, but it's hard with the 49ers running back. They're going to be, pretty steady. And for the most part, when he played, he performed as a running back 2+. He just didn't finish the season for us. So yeah, Clyde Edwards, not good. Mack, the fantasy beast, I hope recovers. Interesting to see where Marlon Mack signs. I'm assuming he's not coming back to Indianapolis, but you think about teams that need running backs, maybe Atlanta Falcons, as we talk about Todd Gurley next year. A team like the Jets could use a starting running back. So Marlon Mack will be kind of interesting here. Melvin Gordon, I don't know if I'd consider him a huge bust. If you look at where he finished, it was actually a successful season. From a fantasy points per game, though, he was low, RB22. Where did we have him at? We had Melvin Gordon here at RB22, so that's cool. But if you look and see where he finished at the end of the season, I mean, the guy was RB13. So if you just left him and plugged him in there for the whole season, it did kind of pay off for the most part. 9 touchdowns, almost 1,000 yards rushing, decent enough receptions. Not a lot of output though in the passing game with 1 touchdown receiving. But he was pretty inconsistent towards the middle of the year. So I don't know if I would call Melvin Gordon a bust. I think if you drafted him, you probably left him in as your RB2. Maybe a flex play for most weeks here. But I didn't love the Melvin Gordon pick coming into the season. We touched on Taylor, on Gibson. If anything, I wasn't high enough on those guys. But at the time, there was, we talked about Adrian Peterson being in the way, Marlon Mack being in the way. So I did feel pretty good about where I had those guys. Cam Akers, interesting one here. Let me see some of the questions. So why Tariq Cohen so high? It was because of the receiving volume of Tariq Cohen. So in the past, if we look at this, I had a good feeling about Tariq Cohen being involved in the passing game. If you go back to 2019, now this was a down year. 2019 was a bad year for Tariq Cohen, and he was RB27 on the season. You see 79 catches, almost 450 yards and 3 touchdowns. And then if we go to the year before, go to 2018, this is where Tariq Cohen was. And he was RB11. The man had 71 catches, 725 yards, and 5 touchdowns. So I kind of expected a bounce back, nothing this high, RB11. But this is another reason why I was lower on David Montgomery too than most people. I actually had David Montgomery pretty low here. I don't know if you guys remember, but before the season started, David Montgomery wasn't practicing. He had a groin injury, and it was actually a surprise that he played the first couple games. We actually thought he was going to be on IR to start the year. So I did have David Montgomery projected for 12. I had him probably 12 to 13 games. So I did miss on that. And then with the Tariq Cohen injury, that's what's making this look pretty bad for the most part here. But I had high expectations for Cohen, especially in PPR best ball formats. I thought that would be a pretty good pick here. So this is technically a miss, but the injury, week 2? I think that really skews things a little bit. The Mark Ingram situation, I probably should have been lower on Mark Ingram for sure. Todd Gurley miss. Let's see here. So we had Todd Gurley at running back 19. Let me just see where his final stats looked at real quick. So we have it filtered by fantasy points. Todd Gurley on the season. Where am I missing him? Mr. Gurley. Oh, this is 2018. That's probably why I'm missing it. Let me go to 2020. So in reality, Todd Gurley finishes as RB29. Almost 700 rushing yards, 9 touchdowns, and 25 and 164. So let me see what the numbers are. Close enough on the yards. I think the receiving volume is where I missed on him, assuming he would have been a little bit heavier used there, better yards per catch, more involved there. So I wasn't drafting Todd Gurley. I think that's what's cool about looking at these now versus looking at them while we're drafting. Because if you were to look at my rankings at the time, like in June or August, you would have seen I was probably lower on Todd Gurley than most people there. So at 19, I wasn't drafting Todd Gurley very much. So if anything, I probably just need to be a little bit more stronger with my injury convictions, like Todd Gurley, James Conner. These are guys where I kind of just projected them for 12 to 13 games here, and that's kind of how it ended up. So where did I have Latavius Murray? Had him at RB47. So we gave him almost 500 rushing yards, 4 touchdowns, 21 catches, and 30 targets there. So Latavius, Mr. Murray here, ends up running back 34, surpassed my yardage, correct on the touchdowns, and fairly accurate with the receiving workload, just no touchdowns. So it was close on Latavius Murray. Probably have to get a little bit bumped up in the receiving category for future years, but fairly decent. Mike Davis, I don't think anyone was projecting Mike Davis to do anything. Let me look and see where everything was built around Christian McCaffrey here. So I had Mike Davis 5 catches or 5 attempts and 20 yards here. I actually thought Reggie Bonifon would be used a little bit more, but I think he went on IR early in the season here. But when you're doing Panthers projections, you weren't thinking much at all about the RB2 situation there. The week 1 stud Hines. Hines had some bright moments various points through the year. Let's actually pull him up, because if you just look at where he finished in PPR, he ended up as the RB 18. So this is kind of like a Tariq Cohen situation, where next year I'm going to feel obligated to to kind of boost his receiving numbers or keep him around the same. So career high receptions, career high receiving yards, career high receiving touchdowns, and then also a career high on the ground here. The attempts, yards, and the touchdowns are all up. So best year of his career. He did have that week 1 boom, but a couple of 20-point boomers here in the middle of the season. And then he actually kind of got consistent towards the end of the year. I think the Colts did a good job of finding a balance between Hines and Jonathan Taylor that worked well for both guys. Like if you were starting both guys the last 6 weeks, you probably felt pretty good about them and their weekly output. So Cam Akers. Now, this one was interesting because going into the year, my narrative was I don't trust the Rams to be a good running football team. So that's probably why I was higher on Goff and not as excited about the running backs. But we do see Cam Akers, 775 yards, 8 touchdowns. Let me see where he ended up with. Probably not even anywhere close. Let's just filter here by team and look for LAR. So Mr. Cam Akers, 625 yards, 2 touchdowns. So I was projecting him to be the lead back. I didn't think Malcolm Brown or Darrell Henderson would factor much into this at all. But they brought the rookie along really slow, a lot slower than I think people would have imagined. But it did seem like towards the end of the year they figured it out. They started, he had that one big game on Thursday Night Football, and I mean at that point the rest of it was pretty much his backfield. And then I do like the uptick in receiving volume here. I think if you're asking about Cam Akers' value for next year, you would love to see the Rams draft some offensive linemen. Their defense is already pretty good, so I would imagine they're going to put some resources into the offensive line. That helps Jared Goff. That helps Cam Akers. I think that's the best situation for that entire offense. So Cam Akers next year, at this point, we got a really good taste of him at the end. I don't know what happened here with this Jets game. Like, that's just such a weird game. And then 21 attempts for 34 yards against Arizona. Again, I had offensive line concerns for the Rams, so I wasn't super excited here. But for the most part, I would expect Cam Akers to be like the feature guy next year. They still like Darrell Henderson. We'll see if Malcolm Brown's back with the team. But can we do punters? No punting projections for me on this end. But I did want to kind of just call out maybe a couple other guys that I might have missed on. Mark Ingram. I don't know why I put this many projections in here. I was actually very high on J.K. Dobbins I was high on Dobbins from a redraft standpoint. So I had him projected correctly for about 815 yards and 6 touchdowns. Let's just see where Mr. Dobbins ended up on the season here as a whole. So J.K. Dobbins, he ended up with 805 yards and 9 touchdowns. What did I have him here? 815 and 6. But I also gave him 2 receiving touchdowns, so 8 total touchdowns, 145 yards through the air. He had 120. So really close with this J.K. Dobbins number. You see 164.5 total points. Mr. Dobbins, I had him projected for 161. So I just I missed on Mark Ingram. I think the thing that I'm learning the most here, though, is that I need to scale back my projections just a little bit. For instance, just looking at David Johnson here, I had David Johnson as my RB24, projected 192 points. Now, if we go and look at RB24 here, 168 points. So my scale is off a little bit. I'm probably being a little bit too generous with the amount of games I'm projecting players. Again, maybe a couple other. Ronald Jones, I technically missed on Ronald Jones, even though I was super high on him. The Leonard Fournette thing scared me off a little bit. Before Leonard Fournette signed with Tampa Bay, I had Ronald Jones projected as like a top 16 back. So I probably should have stuck to my guns a little bit more there. Kareem Hunt, this was technically a miss, but I'm not going to count it as a miss because there was a handful of games where Nick Chubb was hurt. So I still feel pretty decent about that. Maybe I need to bump up those touchdowns a little bit here. Zach Moss and our guy Devin Singletary. I had Zach Moss projected more than Devin Singletary. Did that end out to be true here? I don't think so. So Zach Moss, RB49. Devin Singletary, RB32. So I technically was right about Singletary, but just a little bit off on Zach Moss. I expected more touchdowns and more running effort there. But the biggest miss is going to be David Montgomery. I didn't expect him to play the first 2-3 games at full capacity. He was able to play right away. And then just that end of the season stretch just kind of blew up everything. And then I did have Tariq Cohen kind of projected for quite a bit. So a handful of misses on the running back side here. We're going on about 45 minutes here. Let me just kind of rifle through some of the receivers here. This one's nuts because some of the guys that I missed on that haunted me. DeAndre Hopkins didn't haunt me. I had him as my wide receiver 10. I thought he would be a fringe top 5 receiver. You see the difference here from 10th to 5th. It's only about 10 points. So I kind of had these guys all in the same tier. But my biggest miss, probably of any position, is going to be Stephon Diggs, wide receiver 30. I had Stephon Diggs just under 1,000 yards and 7 touchdowns. And I think the only way I can make this reason make sense to me is I did have John Brown projected for a healthy amount of points here. I think Cole Beasley is probably somewhere around here too. But just I completely missed on the Josh Allen passing outcome there. So that's 2 of the biggest names that stuck out. Stephon Diggs, I missed on Diggs. I think, but for the most part, where I was passing on the guys that I was passing Diggs, Diggs was like a 5th or 6th round pick. I was passing on Stephon Diggs, but I was taking guys like Terry McLaurin. I took in my biggest money draft, I took Terry McLaurin and DK Metcalf over Stephon Diggs. So I still think the process was correct, but for me to miss completely on a guy like Diggs, I should have probably ended up taking him as a 3rd or 4th round pick at the time. So that's technically a miss, but the outcome I was able to get McLaurin and DK Metcalf, so that was okay. Juju at 11, yes, this was technically a rather big miss here. Let's just look at the numbers real quick. So about 1,100 yards and 8 touchdowns. Let's see where Juju ended up. I think he went over 1,000 yards. 830. Okay. So I was really close on the touchdowns, and you see 97 catches. I had Juju at 92, but here's where we were wrong with Juju. You see the 12.2 yards per catch. Juju had an abysmal yards per catch, 8.6, the lowest of his career, not even close. So I feel pretty good about where my targets, my receptions, and my touchdowns were. You see 128 and 97. I had him at 142 and 92. So that's those are fractions, those are close, but the yards, man, the yards were just a little bit off. The yards per catch were kind of wild here. So I think that's a product of Ben Roethlisberger kind of dinking and dunking, not really looking to go downfield. They use Deontay and Chase Claypool down the field a little bit more. So I feel fortunate enough to get some of the numbers really close here, but this was hard to see, these yards per catch being completely off there. And then, yes, Keenan Allen at 25. Now, this one didn't bug me as much as Stephon Diggs, but going into the season, Keenan Allen with Tyrod Taylor, that made me nervous. I really did fade a lot of the Chargers going into the season because it just seemed like Tyrod Taylor was going to be given a long leash with that team, whether it's half a season. I was just very, very nervous about Keenan Allen, how he would fit with a guy like Tyrod Taylor. This team wanted to run the ball with Austin Eckler. They drafted Joshua Kelly. I figured there'd be a little bit more run focused here. But Keenan Allen, 87 catches, 1,000 yards, and 6 touchdowns. Let's see where he ended up on the season. So he did finish as a wide receiver 12, 100 catches, 992 yards, and 8 touchdowns. So for the most part, we did get, roughly the yardage correct. 6 touchdowns here, 87 catches. So it was close, but man, I don't think anyone expected Herbert to just latch onto him like that. I think that was kind of mind blowing here. So, but in hindsight, I probably should have projected Herbert to be into the lineup earlier than what I anticipated. And then for the most part, I don't think anyone could have projected Justin Herbert to play as well as he did. So that's probably a really common miss, is just missing that entire potential from the Chargers offense there. But again, I was a little bit low on that entire Chargers offense. So DJ Chark was a bust, didn't even play. Yeah, he was in and out of the lineup. And so if you guys end up watching my shows with me during the summer, I didn't talk about DJ Chark much at all this summer. He was not a guy that I was focused on. If you're watching my shows, the guys that I was telling people to draft, especially like in that 4th, 5th, 6th round, I was telling people to draft Mike Evans in the 3rd, Tyler Lockett in the 4th, AJ Brown when you could. I wasn't into Amari Cooper, but I did like Woods. I liked McLaurin, Calvin Ridley. I didn't really like Kupp or Chark, but Metcalf was the guy that I pumped up a lot all summer. So if I had any kind of hits it would have been DK Metcalf. But as far as misses, again, Keenan Allen, somewhat of a miss here. Stephon Diggs, man, that's the one that haunts me the most. And then I'm just trying to think. Will Fuller. Now this was another big miss. But with Will Fuller, I didn't have him projected for a full season of games. That's kind of what the lesson I'm learning here is. You kind of have to trust your gut with the injuries. Guys like James Conner, Raheem Mostert, the guys that we've kind of seen get dinged up. For some reason, I trusted my gut with Will Fuller getting hurt at some point, so I didn't project him for his ceiling. So maybe going forward next year, I type in how many games here, and I look maybe I look to see if I can add a column projecting how many games here. So yes, he was a beast, but with my thinking here is I just kind of figured he wasn't going to play a full season. So he wasn't a guy that I wanted on my team, because even if you get him for 8 games, what are you doing with the rest of the 8 games? So for me, I was taking guys in that range. I was probably taking CeeDee Lamb. I ended up with CeeDee Lamb on a lot of my teams. That looked really good when Dak Prescott was playing. But again, for the most part, I was telling a lot of people to take wide receivers in this range. Just for my instance, for the 2 leagues that I cared about the most, the receivers I played with were A.J. Brown, McLaurin, Ridley, Metcalf, even Tyler Boyd was on a few teams, Marquise Brown. So there was a couple other things going on there. But yeah, the Giants, man, it's hard to imagine them being a consistent passing team at all with Daniel Jones. But we're probably going to get sucked back into that Saquon Barkley thing. And if you fade, it's like one of those things where, like, if you fade Barkley, he's going to have a great year. And then if you buy into the Giants receivers or Barkley or Ingram or anything, it's just going to be a tough situation. So for me, a lot of it is a lot of the guys that I draft. So like when I do my projections, I'll just kind of pull this up here. So let's look at a team like the Giants. So when I do my projections, this is all the numbers that I projected for last season, but I also have the last few years logged, and then all these orange columns are represented up here. So I'm kind of like looking for averages and just seeing, okay, they did this last year or the year before. Or he was, I'm just kind of seeing what's been going on and maybe what's changed. That helps me with the coaches and the offensive coordinator here. So I'm looking at previous year's trends, and then if I look at a team, I can bump up the passing numbers if I feel stronger about that, or I can lower the rushing numbers if offensive linemen left the team. So I'm looking a lot at yearly averages and kind of going that way with my numbers. So I don't know if there's any other receivers here. I wasn't really high on Odell Beckham. I was high on Michael Gallup. This probably was a miss. Even when Dak Prescott was playing, Michael Gallup was a little bit frustrating. I wasn't high on Cortland Sutton as other people. Marquise Brown was kind of in the correct area. But yeah, Deontay Johnson, I technically missed on Deontay, but 855 yards and 7 touchdowns, 71 total catches. He did end up with 88, 924, and 7. So it was close. I wasn't expecting a top, 24 season out of the wide receiver there. So there's a few things that, were missed here, but the guys that are going to haunt me the most is probably Stephon Diggs, and not seeing how good of a connection that could be with Josh Allen. A little bit low on Mr. Hopkins here, but for the most part, Deontay, these are easy calls. Devontae Adams, Tyreek Hill, Chris Godwin was in and out of the lineup for a good part of the season. And then, of course, Kenny Galladay got hurt. We did have, Adam Thielen pretty high. I didn't have I guess one of the biggest misses, if you're going to call me one of the biggest receivers missed, I do think Justin Jefferson was a miss. I didn't see him having that year coming. What's going on, Eduardo? My day's going beautiful. It's Wednesday night. We got really nothing going on, and we're streaming. So anytime I'm streaming, I'm having a good day. So thank you for hanging out, and thank you for asking. How's your day going, Eduardo? And how often do I stream? It depends on the time of the year. During I guess weeks 1 through 16 of the NFL season, I'm basically streaming 6 days a week. Usually at this time slot, 6 to 7 p.m. Central Time. But now that fantasy football is over, I kind of got lucked out, and some people like the basketball content that we've been putting out. So I think on Tuesdays and Thursday nights, those are going to be basketball content nights. So if you're into fantasy basketball, those will be the main points there. But now that the fantasy season's over, Let's see here. During the year, we also had a Saturday morning. I would hang out with my friend Jesse, and we would do player prop bets. So we'd sit and talk for an hour, looking at DraftKings Sportsbook. So that's going to continue into the playoffs. So Saturday morning, we're still going to do our player prop show, and then I guess once the NFL season's over, we're probably going to turn that Saturday morning show into like a dynasty, rookie draft kind of talk stuff. So I don't know. I started this YouTube channel in May of this year, and I kind of had no expectations, but we've been getting some good numbers lately, and a lot of people seem to like. A lot of people like the basketball, which kind of surprised me. My fantasy football content's been kind of a slow, steady stream, but definitely in the I guess after. So I wanted to kind of conclude my draft process here from the 2020 fantasy football, summer prep. So I think on Friday night I might do a stream where I maybe I don't even need to do it. I was going to talk about the things that I was right on, but I don't know if I want to toot the horn. So I might just leave this as the last, 2020 review video. But I'm thinking we're gonna probably, I don't know if it interests anybody else, but I'm gonna probably start putting out some 2021 like draft content. I want to talk about some of the receivers I've been watching, the running backs. I don't know if anyone else plays dynasty, dynasty fantasy football leagues out there, but that's where my mind's at right now. I've been watching a lot of receivers and tape and taking notes and stuff. So I think I'm gonna start highlighting some of the off season stuff, and then maybe Wednesday nights will be a football night where we kind of just talk about news or anything in the playoffs. So I'm trying to find a rhythm in the off season for shows, but definitely for basketball, Tuesday, Thursdays, that's going to be a show that I do, consistently Tuesdays and Thursday nights. And then I don't know, as I go along, we'll kind of figure out a better schedule, but I'm trying to do as many streams as I can. It seems like people enjoy the thought process and stuff. So I'm glad you like the basketball shows. That means a lot to me. This is a lot of fun. I'm hoping to do more of this in the future. Essentially, I'd like to leave the job and do this full time and make more videos and more content and have more time put into this. But just looking at the tight ends real quick from last year, Kelsey, of course, that's an easy call to be the number one tight end. George Kittle would have been probably number two, but Zach Ertz, we missed on Zach Ertz. I should have faded Zach Ertz even more, because I was pretty high on Dallas Goedert. I should have probably had, Ertz even lower at that point, because I just like Dallas Goedert so much. But Mark Andrews, Darren Waller, we're going to call Darren Waller a miss. I didn't have him projected for 1,000 yards, only 5 touchdowns, 72 catches. He was the number 2 tight end this season. I'm pretty sure he was number 2. So yeah, number 2, over almost 1,200 yards, 9 touchdowns, 107 catches. I missed on Mr. Darren Waller here. Jared Cook, I had him just way too high. I had him kind of pegged for a full season with Drew Brees catching touchdowns. Rob Gronkowski, will take that as kind of a W here. He was tight end number 8 on the year here. TJ Hawkinson, I had him at tight end 8. So I think if you watch my shows, I talked very highly of TJ Hawkinson. So he did finish as tight end 5 for the most part. I tried pushing people towards TJ Hawkinson. So for sure, I really like that spot there. Jonnu Smith, this was a guy I was pretty high on. Tight end 9, that's a pretty high ranking here, and he did finish as tight end number 16. He missed a couple games here, but 8 touchdowns. The yardage and the receptions just wasn't consistent enough here, so I kind of missed. I overshot on Jonnu Smith here, but the first month of football, Jonnu Smith was a top 5 tight end. You got Hunter Henry here. I felt pretty reliable with him. If there was one Charger that I advised drafting, it would have been Hunter Henry, just because he's a steady tight end with Tyrod Taylor. He's consistent enough with that position. Chris Herndon. I don't even want to talk about Chris Herndon. Yeah, that's. I appreciate that comment a lot. I try to do as much positive talk as I can. There's a lot of negativity in the world. And my mindset's always trying to think about the best of a situation here. Even when something's not a good situation, I'll try to find something positive to learn or to take from it here. So with the Jets here, what do you do with the Jets? The positive side here is, they're getting new coaches in there. They're getting new players in there. They're going to have a lot of draft picks and hopefully a lot of turnover at the top. But there's some pieces to work with in the New York Jets system. But for the most part here, Chris Herndon, what was I doing having him at 58 catches, 650 yards, 6 touchdowns? I guess I drank the Kool-Aid on the offseason buzz from Chris Herndon. Now, you're a Jets fan, so yeah. I mean, if I don't know if you watched that Ohio State game against Clemson the other night, but if you guys want to take a quarterback, man, Justin Fields. I mean, I'm not gonna. You guys don't have the number 2 pick anymore, though, do you? I can't remember the official draft order here. Let me take a look. NFL draft order, ESPN.com. So you guys get the number 2 pick. I mean, it's there for the taking. If you guys can get a fair value for Sam Darnold, I think, I think you guys can maybe get a second round pick if you guys are okay with taking a second round pick. I don't think any team's going to offer up a first round pick for Sam Darnold, but there's teams that want a young quarterback. There's a lot of teams that want a young quarterback in a position to start him right away. Maybe a team like Pittsburgh, who knows if Roethlisberger is going to play again. A team like Indianapolis, I'm thinking of teams with veteran quarterbacks, or they're just unhappy with their situation, and those are the 2 teams that come to mind. I could see Sam Darnold succeeding there that's if you guys wanted to go with Justin Fields and kind of restart this process. But I just know as new coaches go, sometimes they want to get their guys, so that'll be kind of interesting to see what the Jets do. And yeah, I just man, I'm a huge Denzel Mims fan. I drafted him in a lot of dynasty leagues this year, so I liked what I saw to Denzel Mims from the small sample that we got. I think he's going to be a guy that I'm interested in watching him in the summer. It just sucked because he had the hamstring injury pretty much the whole first half of the year, so he probably didn't even scratch the surface with his potential yet. So I'm expecting some really good things about Denzel Mims. We'll see what they do at quarterback. But as far as tight ends go, really quick, Blake Jarwin. Now, this is technically a miss because Jarwin he got hurt week 1, tears the ACL. This was a devastating blow for me. I was very high on Blake Jarwin. A lot of people did not believe that the Dallas Cowboys offense could produce a top 12 tight end with all that receiver talent and Ezekiel Elliott. But I had him at tight end number 12, and you see Dalton Schultz at tight end number 10. He finished with 63 catches, 615 yards, and 4 touchdowns. Now, I had Jarwin for 60 catches, 700 yards, and 5 touchdowns. So the process here was very, very close. And with Jarwin coming back next year, he's going to be a guy I watch all summer for sure. I was low on Higbee. I was low on Hurst, low on Austin Hooper, low on Evan Ingram. Kind of low. This is a miss here. Mike Gesicki. I had big numbers projected for Preston Williams. Also, good numbers for Devontae Parker. Wasn't really sure who the running back was going to be, so I kind of leaned into the wide receivers. But also a miss here on Noah Fant. For the most part here, I'm not a fan of Drew Lock, guys. I was fading as many Broncos as I could left and right. 62 catches, 673 yards, and 3 touchdowns for Noah Fant. We had him at 45, 605, and 5. So some of the numbers are similar there, but for the most part, I thought I did a decent job on the tight ends. That's probably the easiest spot to draft here. But yeah, Zach Ertz at tight end number 3. Ertz had been fading, of the last couple of years. He had that breakout season maybe 2 or 3 years ago, but I've always been a big fan of Dallas Goedert. I've kind of seen that Goddard's been catching up, even his rookie season compared to last year. Goedert is the guy of the future there. Who knows what they do with Zach Ertz? You might see Zach Ertz sign with a new team, maybe a team like you put him in Jacksonville, teams that, need to feature a tight end here. Maybe a team like, let's see here, Buffalo would be interesting. I know Dawson Knox is still there, but Buffalo with Zach Ertz, that'd be kind of fun. A team like the Patriots, getting a tight end like Zach Ertz's caliber, that could be kind of fun. A team like Arizona, that could be a really good tight end spot. I suppose the Jets, I don't know if you're happy with Herndon in the future, but a team like the Jets could definitely use a guy like Zach Ertz. So a lot of fun though, but for the most part, I think I'm going to continue to sit and look at some of these numbers here that I had and just kind of keep retweaking my process. But essentially, when I'm doing all this fantasy football prep work, there's one fantasy league that I play in that I have in mind, and it's the Fantasy Fellowship League that I created my senior year of high school, and now we're going into We just completed our 11th season as a league together, and all my draft prep, and the reason why I do this is because I want to. That's the one league that you want to win. There's a lot of trash talking and some good friendships in there. So all of my process is so I can win that. And the last 2 seasons I've been really close. I went 12-1 this year. Lost the championship by 5 points. Jonathan Taylor got me pretty good here. So the guy that I played, he made a pretty good trade for Jonathan Taylor towards the end of the season, and that was kind of what did it. But man, so close this year. 12-1 season, one of my best fantasy seasons ever. But it was a lot of fun. This year was a lot of fun. Guys that I drafted again, I was very high on Tom Brady. I was taking him any league that I could. Because I play in super flex leagues, I was getting Ryan Tannehill's and even Teddy Bridgewater, Derek Carr's. These guys did have a pretty decent amount of output throughout random points of the year. But the running backs that I was plucking, Aaron Jones, Josh Jacobs, these were two of the guys here that were on my must draft list. I was taking Derrick Henry as high as number 3 overall in some best ball leagues. So I was all over the Derrick Henry train here. And then if I didn't get my Henry, my Jones, my Jacobs, I was kind of fading the running backs for the most part, and I ended up looking for like a J.K. Dobbins. I did end up with some DeAndre Swift shares, and then guys like Duke Johnson, some pass-catching running backs, Chris Thompson. So I was looking there. But for me, the position that I think I'm the most successful at picking guys is going to be the wide receivers. Now, again, I missed on Stephon Diggs pretty bad, but the guys that I was drafting, I guess I'm going to consider DJ Moore a bit of a miss too, because I had him projected for a lot more receptions and targets, but Robbie Anderson kind of wrecked that. But for the most part, I was super gung-ho about DJ Moore and his opportunity, but they used him differently. He was not really a possession receiver. They were making him stretch the field more, so it almost seemed like the roles were reversed. Robbie Anderson played like DJ Moore, and DJ Moore played like Robbie Anderson. So that was a little bit of a confusion there. But I went into this season drafting Devontae Adams and Tyreek Hill a lot. I would get DJ Moore, Godwin when I could in the second, Godwin in the second, maybe DJ Moore in the third. But for sure, I was getting AJ Brown anywhere I could, Terry McLaurin anywhere I could, Calvin Ridley, and then DK Metcalf. Those were my prizes. I just thought rounds 3, 4, 5, and 6. That was the round where you want to take receiver. So we did have a pretty good opportunity there. And then with Lamar Jackson, I think I did project, like I had all of Lamar's, like all of his numbers came down, but I just didn't have them come down far enough. So Mahomes really closed the gap in terms of my projections. But yeah, man, I should have had a little bit more inconsistency with the passing numbers. I think he ended up with 26 touchdowns to 30 here. But yeah, for the most part, Lamar Jackson, a bit of a disappointment. But I think that's gonna do it for tonight's show. We hit on a lot of the misses. I learned a lot this year. I mean, I put out my projection document every season. I put out my rankings. So basically, as soon as the NFL draft is done, I'll also be doing a lot of mock drafting. Probably have some mock draft shows and things like that to just talk about the prospects and just help you guys look at some of the rookies that we're looking at. But starting in May, we'll probably do a mock draft or two and get some thoughts going. But definitely in May is when I can open up my projection document and start working on projections for the next season. So a lot of things coming here. I'll be doing my basketball show tomorrow night. If you want to come hang out, stop by. Don't forget to like the video. I don't ask for anything. I just the likes on the video. That's one of the most important things that I can ask for, because YouTube, their algorithm, when they see a liked video, that lets them know that this is something worth watching. And it also just helps other people see the video. If you're looking for fantasy football videos, it makes this one pop up a little bit more. So don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. I hope everyone has a great evening. And thank you again so much for your time. And we'll see you guys in another video. Thanks. Peace.